Hi, welcome to the Always Evolving podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Elizabeth Fedrick. Self-love appears simple in theory, yet so many of us struggle with putting ourselves last, which unfortunately takes a tremendous toll on our mental health and well-being. Joining us today is Jada Butler, a physician assistant and licensed professional therapist. Jada is here to explain the profound connection between self-love and wellness, and she offers some actionable steps to enhance our self-care practices, which will foster holistic wellness.
It's okay that we don't have it all figured out. We're all just taking it a day at a time. This is Always Evolving with Dr. Liz.
Hi, Jada. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes, I am excited to chat with you. Tell everyone who you are and what you do.
I'm Jada, and I am a medically trained physician assistant and a licensed professional therapist. And the other thing I didn't mention is I'm also a personal trainer. So I really swirl all
In all your free time? Yes.
I swirl all my passions into the online wellness company that I created called Soul Via Soul. So SOUL via SOLE, like the soles of our feet. It's through embodying love that we find the essence of who we are and kind of our mission here on earth.
Yes, I love that. Yes, and we were joking before we started recording about, well, I guess it's not really a joke. I think that you really are probably an overachiever. But we were chatting about how that is our community here at Always Evolving is people who really appreciate growth and personal development and achievement. And so I think it's great for individuals like yourself who have achieved so much to be able to come on and talk about the self-love and the wellness piece, because a lot of times that the perfectionism, the overachieving is rooted in these maybe beliefs about ourselves that were developed early on, whether about our worth or our value. And so, we get caught up in this cycle of trying to prove to ourselves our worth. But I love that your spin that you're taking on it of really focusing on that self-love.
Yeah. And I mean, as a therapist, you know that unhealed trauma is going to come out at some point in our lives. And especially if we have those limiting beliefs about our worth, then we can go down the road of people pleasing, overachieving, sloppy boundaries, and really unhealthy, toxic relationships. And all of that can impact our mental and physical well-being. So I love the idea of really weaving both my therapy and the medical into understanding that really wellness is rooted in how we love ourselves and really going back and undoing that trauma and knowing our worth, because you can't love a body you hate. You're not going to take care of a vessel that you really just don't like. And so really learning how to love yourself is the cornerstone of wellness. And I just don't think that those two were talked about in the same sentence, and simultaneously how loving ourselves and knowing our worth really does give us the tools then to do all the healthy things, to let us choose healthy, nourishing foods, to move our body, to give ourselves self-compassion and build that resilience to keep going and work on those wellness goals.
Right. I completely agree. How do you define self-love? That is where I get a bit hung up on the term self-love, because I think it is thrown around so much. And I think that societally it has been thrown around almost, it's led to some shame messages for people who maybe struggle with loving themselves or even knowing what that means. How do you define it?
I agree with that. And I did a post recently about, it's not fluffy. Self-love to me is a verb. Self-love is action. And it's the way that we literally nourish and take care of ourselves. And I also think self-love is akin to healing, because it involves that nurturing and prioritizing our own needs, which is really akin with a healing journey that we would take as as a therapist who've been in therapy myself for years, and then turned around and try to help women find their paths themselves through that healing journey. So to me, self-love is number one, it's a verb, it's actionable,
Yeah.
and it's really how we nurture and take care of ourselves, as well as really going into that healing space.
Right. That is very similar to how I describe it when I'm talking with clients or online about it, in terms of replacing self-love with self-respect. And I think that a lot of people can connect to that because we know a bit more what respect, does and doesn't look like in terms of the boundaries and what
Right.
we tolerate, and as you're saying, how we show up for ourselves, and also equating it to, the very cliche, but would you treat a friend or a loved one in the ways that you treat yourself? And I think that's also another really good way to assess if you are engaging in self-love, because when we think about, our children or our romantic partners, and the way that we want to nurture them and we want to make sure they feel safe and they feel
Mhm.
connected, that we have the opportunity to do that for ourselves also.
And a lot of times as women, we don't.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Culturally, there's a whole lot of layers around that. Why we don't value ourselves as we would value a child or a spouse, or sometimes even like a business, like a work relation. Like we just don't value ourselves as we should. And I think that's something that women particularly, I think, struggle with. And it's why I feel so impassioned about that. And, another definition of self-love, and I just really love this analogy, is when I started therapy, when I started my own healing journey before I became a therapist. I remember sitting across the couch from this beautiful, strong woman, my therapist, and she said to me, I'm going to teach you how to hold your heart with care.
Mm.
And that was such a lovely phrase. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what holding my heart with care even looks like.
Yeah.
And that was so powerful. It stuck with me. And so, to me, my mission, especially with Sylvia Soul and just being a holistic psychiatric provider and my other like brick and mortar business, is really to teach people to hold their hearts with care and to live from a heartfelt space. When we live in from that space, then I think that we are way more susceptible and encouraged to really go after the things in life that are going to fill up our souls.
Sure. Agreed. And I really see this, I think, take place for all genders in terms of like the shame messages that are specific to, what society has, the messages they've sent, but then also what our parents have sent because of
Mhm.
obviously society. You don't know what you don't know. And
Right.
I agree with that I think that all genders have this experience in a different way that is so unique to them and so
Mhm.
insidious for them. And to be able to tap into what is it that I didn't get in childhood? What am I not getting currently? What am I seeking external validation for that I could be providing for myself? That is such a powerful way to start to tap into this self-respect that, you know, just because certain people haven't been able to provide that for us doesn't mean that we're not deserving of it.
Absolutely. And not only that, not only are we not deserving, but it's really kind of our job as adults to come back and do the work to heal that inner child. So
Yeah.
we do come back and save ourselves, basically. And
Yeah.
just to touch on the all genders, absolutely 100%, not to exclude the men. I've heard from a lot of men too, especially in younger men who struggle with what it is to be a man today. Like there's a real struggle with young men, especially knowing kind of where they are in the world, and being providers, and some men, being more of the caretakers, and the shame and the gender roles that are a little bit blurred, and can
Yeah.
be there can be a lot of growth and healing, and just trying to identify, we're just a person and to go back and absolutely feel empowered to find your worth, do the work, and know that you're absolutely 100% deserving to live a life that you love and a life that loves you back.
Yes, which requires us to extend ourselves a lot of grace and compassion that can be really hard to do. What are a couple wellness tips that you give to individuals on this journey when they're, trying to bring the wellness aspect into their healing, into their improvement? Where do you start with that?
I used to start with when I first started out, people would come to me because they wanted to improve their physical health and wellness. And it'd be like, oh, I want to learn how to eat better, or I want to learn how to exercise every day. Or I want to, these were very exterior, outward measures of wellness.
Sure.
And so we start there, but often then the conversation goes to, oh, I don't feel worthy of that. And so often now I start with, how do you feel about yourself? And tell me kind of the things that you do every day that you nurture, and how do you show up for yourself? And I find a lot of people really struggle with just prioritizing giving themselves 10 minutes. And
So
so
true.
really we just start with time. Like, are you willing to invest time and maybe we'll go through a few things like, go for a walk, or make sure you drink your water, or let's talk about your sleep hygiene, like all those foundational pieces of health and wellness. But if we don't, first of all, value setting aside time for ourselves, we don't get very far. So we have to really start with a very basic thing of, how much time are you going to invest today and every day in pouring into yourself in some intentional way that is to be a gesture of loving you, whatever that looks like? So, and there's lots of ways that we can love ourselves, mindfulness and journaling and exercise and nutrition, like so many pillars of wellness. But if we don't give ourselves permission,
Right.
to have time with ourselves and get to know ourselves, we don't get very far.
Yeah, we're not really going to go anywhere with it. Yes, I use the rocks in the jar analogy for
Yeah.
myself and for my clients that, you put the rocks in first and then the
Yep.
sand around it, and makes a
Yep.
huge difference.
Yep.
Such good information, Jada. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? Your website, social media?
Yeah. So, social media is kind of a new thing for me. I'm in my 50s and I had to learn all this. Like, all my kids made fun of me. They're like, Mom, do not start a TikTok. I'm like, well, I'm gonna.
Oh, well,
So I'm
clearly I
on
am.
so I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and of course my website. So it's Soul Via, so SOUL, and then VIA SOLE, and Via is the way through. So we find our soulful selves through our body, through loving our body, embodying love, so that we can really get to the well of our soulful selves.
Well, I love that message. Thank you so much for being here and for all of your insights. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Jada, for giving us some great tips on self-love. And thank you all for joining us on the Always Evolving podcast. We would love it if you could rate and subscribe, and also check out our website, www.evolvecounselingaz.com, to sign up for weekly e-newsletters with even more helpful mental health tips. You can also find us on Instagram at Evolve Counseling AZ. This is Always Evolving with Dr. Liz.